So in this lesson, we're just going to look at getting started with Python by running it and creating our very first program. And that's the great thing about Python, is it gets you started straight away and it's very easy to kind of get going. So the first program that you would run on any programming language is the program Hello World. And what the Hello World program does is just shows you that everything works properly. So it's a way of inputting and outputting straight to the console and just seeing if what you're expecting to happen actually does happen, or if there's going to be bigger problems with the installation. Now, like I said in the last lesson, installing Python is a very simple task. Once you've installed it, it's pretty much up and running and good to go. But you still need to run this Hello World program just to make sure it does what you expect it to do. So that's what we're going to do in just a moment. Some of the other objectives for this lesson then is to show you how to get users to input data, show users how to, or show the program how to store that data, both as a manual part of the program and as part of the input, and also show you how to output that data. Some of the programming terms that we're going to use in this lesson are the print, which is an output, variables, which are a method of storing data, input, which is a method of getting the user to type in what you want them to have as an input, and then strings, which is a data type for characters. So if you want to write a sentence, you would write it as a string. Once we've done that, you have an extension task. So the extension task is to create a program that asks for 10 pieces of information from the user, or stuff that can already be stored. Then you need to store this information inside the program and then print out a sentence with the information contained. So let's move on. So here we are on the desktop, and last lesson we just installed Python. So let's just go through where that is. So if we come down to the Windows icon and then we scroll down to the P section, and then we'll see that Python is there. Currently we've got Python 3.4. Your system may have something like 5 or 3.5 or 3.7. We're not going to use Python 2 in this course, as it's slowly but surely becoming deprecated. That will take years, but Python 3 is definitely the way to go if you are starting out. So Python 3.4, click on this, and the first thing we want to run is idle. So once we start up idle, you're going to have this interface here, and like I showed you guys last lesson, this is a great way of testing bits of code, but it's not a very good way of actually creating a whole 1,000-line program or 2,000-line program. And the reason for this is it doesn't allow you to go back and edit. So once you type something, that's it. So let me just show you what I run last time, and we'll run the Hello World program. So here's our Hello World program that we're going to create in just a moment. So it says print, which is an output statement, followed by these brackets. So because it's got these brackets in Python, that basically means it's a function, but we'll come on to that in a minute. And then we have this string character of Hello World. When I press enter, it will give me that information. When I try to click on the Hello World to edit it and try and type something, I'll get a big error, basically saying you can't do that in idle or the shell. This is just for running programs. So you can type some stuff as an input, you can run the program, but that's it. So if you want to create your own program, you need to come up to the file icon or button menu, and then say new file. And there you are, you have a new program. Now you can actually start creating a proper one. And what I tend to do is just come into the idle area and just close that down. We will come back to running that in a minute, but I'll just show you that for now. The first thing I also do is save my file straight away. So go to File, Save, and then find your Documents area. So what I would suggest to you guys is have inside your documents, have a computer science folder, and then inside that have a folder called Python Basics. So once you've got your Python Basics folder set up, you can then save your file. So let me just come in. I've got mine saved on my desktop, but if you go to your documents, that would be better. Let's just do that. So Python Basics, here we are, and you're just going to call this Hello World. Now, what I tend to do is put an underscore or a hyphen or just join them together, because in the future you will be learning different languages. There's no ifs or buts. Python will probably be the first language you learn, but it won't be the last. And a lot of conventions from other languages really hate spaces when you're creating names for files. So I tend to just kind of use the underscore character and leave it at that. And then you can say .py. This specifies it's going to be a Python file. which will obviously help it run. It's not always necessary to put the .py, as this save as type generally gives you the Python file here. Make sure it does say Python file in this area here, because if it says text, it obviously won't work. Okay, but I always tend to say just .py at the end, and that just makes sure that it saves it as the appropriate file, and then you can press save. So if we go over to our folder, you now see we have this hello world, and we have this kind of Python icon on it as well, which is great. If you were to double click on this, it would open in idle. Now this is the idle, and you see that black screen open and close. That's how you would run a program outside. So if you just double click on it, it will just run that black one, finish the program and close up. If you want to get back to your editing screen, you have to right click on it and open with idle. When you open with idle, it will give you this screen that we've got open here, okay? So that's just a couple of things that is slightly different with Python, but it should be fairly straightforward. So let me zoom in. Let's create our first program. So print and then these two brackets. And that basically says that this is going to output, and the print is a function. So these two brackets here basically tell us that whatever goes inside is going to be a function. We'll get more onto that later, because you have built-in functions like the print statement, but you also have functions that you can make yourself. Now inside of this, we just need a string value. Now the string value are these two speech marks here, and then whatever goes into this is going to be a string. So you can write whatever sentence you want inside of here. I'm just going to say hello world because that's the first program that I want to run. But it can be anything. Hello world, this is Mr. Cameron, or something like that. It makes no difference. So once you have this, the first thing I would do is save it. However, so file save if you want to. I'm not going to do that just yet, because another thing you can do is run it. And if you say run module, the next message to come up will say, do you want to save this? So run module, do you want to save it? Press OK, and then it will run the code. So it run the code, hello world. We now know that we are working and everything is good, okay? What I tend to do from there is I always close the shell, because next time I come to run it, if this shell is still open, it could cause me a couple of issues. So I tend to shut it before running it again. So this is an output statement, and once again you can put whatever string you want. So this is called a string. Hello world, a sentence, any character inside of those speech marks is called a string. So we'll say this is Mr. C. Okay, run it, run module, and then press OK. So off it pops, and there it is. So this is Mr. C, and then close it. So we're happy that we can write sentences now. So if you want to pause the video right now and just try that for yourself, just your first ever piece of code, and that is a program what we've just written. So run that now, and then we'll move on. Okay, so in this next bit we're going to look at variables. Variables are ridiculously important, and variables are a way of storing information. So the first variable that I'm going to use is the word name. This is quite common, and then we say equals. So by saying name equals, that's basically specifying a variable. And you can save stuff to that variable. So in this instance, we're just going to save another way of creating the hello world program. So we're going to say hello world, okay? And there is a stored variable. So what that basically says is anything, whenever you call up the word name, it will show you the result hello world. So what we did before is we said print, and then we had these brackets, and then we had the string of hello world. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. But as you get more down the line, you're definitely going to need to save information. So using the variable name is a way of saving that information. So if I change this and I just say name, notice that there's no strings. Okay, there's no speech marks. It's just the word name, which is directly linked to this variable. Then if I save it, we will get exactly the same result. So then we say save. And then we ping it out and we say hello world. There we go. So it's exactly the same result. It's just a different way of writing it. So you can choose to write it as a string inside of the print, or you can choose to write it as a string housed inside of a variable. So why could this be important? Which brings me on to the next and last kind of bit of information that we're going to bring up in this one. So we're going to have name, but this time we're going to house name inside of an input. So we're going to say input, and then we're going to have these brackets here. So let me just get rid of hello world for just a second. Okay, so we've got our variable and we've got the equal sign, but then we're going to use an input. Now let me just delete this just briefly because I want to show you that you can have an input all on its own. So you can say inside of a string, what is your name? Okay, and a question mark, and you can run this. So at the moment there is no way of storing that, so we could run this information. Let's do that, and you can do it as well. So pause the video, try this for yourself. So run the information, press yes, and it will say to me, what is your name? So I can write Mr. C, and then I can press enter. But then look what happens, nothing happens. It basically says to me, yeah, great, you've just made me input Mr. C, but because it's not a variable, it's not stored it. It's not done anything with that information. It's just, you know, and that could be quite nice if you want to create some kind of thing where you're just having jargon with the computer. That could be quite nice, but the computer's making no references, it's making no data blocks for you. It's just kind of doing its thing. So let's close this again. Now let's put it inside of name. And we'll say equals input, and then we'll print name. So we'll say print. And remember, all print is doing is it's displaying it. So if we just said print, it still wouldn't do anything. The main difference is this name value with whatever you put in here is now stored to computer. It's now stored in the memory, which means it can be called whenever you want it to. So currently, we want to call it now with name. So we're going to say name as a variable, input what is your name, and then print out that person's name. So we're going to say run, and we're going to say OK, and then say what's your name, Mr. C. Press enter, and this is hey Mr. C. Yeah, so it's giving you that information back. And to show you what that also means is we can use a thing called concatenation. So I can say string, and I can just say hi, and then I use this comma and then this name. So I also put space after hi just to make sure it spaces itself out with the name. So now when it prints, it will say hi, and then it will grab this information from name and say Mr. C. So let's run it, and then I'll get you guys to try it. So run the module, press OK, and it says okay, what's your name? So let's give it a different name. So let's say Ken. Press enter. This is hi Ken. So we are there. We're actually storing that piece of information, and we can use that in other different ways. So what I'd like you to do now is just have a go at running that input. So far what we've done is we've got the user to input data, we've stored that information, and then we've showed them that information and concatenated it with other string values. So try that for yourself now. Pause the video. Okay, the next and last thing is we're going to create a list of variables. These variables can be inputs, they can be static information, whatever. This is the extension task. So you're going to create, for your extension task, you're going to create 10 pieces of information, either from static information that the computer stored or information that the user's input, and then you're going to show the user that information. So I'll do the first 3 or 4 just to show you some variations, and then you can go ahead and try it for yourself. So the first thing is I'm going to have a welcome variable. Okay. So welcome. And then we'll say equals, and I'm just going to have a string value. So this is something that I'm putting in. Okay, so that's just something I've put in, nothing too major there. Then the next bit is name, what's your name? So another piece of information we could store is maybe age. We could say, okay, age, so we could say input, and then we can give those brackets because input is also a function. And then inside that we can say what's your age? Question mark. So now we have 3 bits of information. Then your final part of this mission is to show them all of that information. So we can say hi name, So I need to get rid of that. Let's just get rid of that to there, because otherwise it won't be right. So it'll say hi name, and then we'll put a comma in there as well, and we'll say welcome, and then another comma, and then we'll put a string value, you are, another space, and then another comma, age, and then another comma because I just want a full stop. Okay, so basically we've concatenated this, so it will say hi, whatever the name is. So hi Mr. C, welcome to my game, you are however old you are, 21 obviously, and then full stop. Okay, so what your mission is to have 10 pieces of information, both generated from the computer and user inputted, and then you want a massive sentence to be printed out at the end. And then we have our first very basic program. So let's just run this, make sure it works, and you guys can have a go. So we'll press OK, and then it says what is your name, and I'll say Mr. C. Press enter again. This is what's your age, 21, and then it says hi Mr. C, welcome to my game, you are 21. Okay, so that's what you're aiming for, and then I'll see you in the next lesson.